Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 23 playthrough of the Colorado Rockies. We are about to start the 2051 season. Will be our third year as general manager of the Rockies. Have made pretty good progress with the franchise. Had a 74 win season as we started the rebuild. Jumped up to 96 wins last season. And it's been a very eventful offseason for the Rockies. We've made a lot of big trades, one big free agent signing, and then lots of other trades and less significant acquisitions of minor leaguers along the way. And for the third year in a row, we are going to break camp with a Rule 5 player on our roster. When we left our last episode, we had made the almost final cuts out of spring training. It had cut the roster down to 27 players. We're still deciding on the 26th. And we are going to keep the young first baseman, Adam Fields, up. He's never played higher than high A ball, but I do think with his strong contact rating and the potential that he will have a pretty strong home run power rating, he could be a pretty interesting first baseman slash DH for the Rockies in the future. Like the fact that he's durable. He's got no speed. He can't bunt. Doesn't have a personality apparently. And he's very mediocre defensively, even for a first baseman. Although at 6'5", at least he should have some decent range. But I think the bat is potentially very useful. So we decided to keep Fields on the team. One of our big trades this offseason was to bring on Elijah Moore, who's a first base slash designated hitter slash left fielder for us. And we still have Jamel Cohen, who is in the final year of the contract that we have to honor. We've got a team option for him at $18 million for next year when he's going to be 33 years old. So depending on how he performs this season, and how young Mr. Fields looks 6 or 7 months from now, and how he also performs this year, he could give us a very low-cost alternative to Mr. Cohen that is perhaps pretty similar offensively. The big question with Fields is whether his power is going to develop to the same level that Cohen's is, but you can see looking at his contact and gap power ratings, they're already higher than Cohen's. Now, admittedly, with his brutal speed, that gap power is going to not do too much for us, but decided to keep him on the roster. And we also decided, just playing in Colorado, which can be a tough park for pitchers, that we're going to break camp with 13 pitchers and 13 position players. So that meant that we had to make a difficult cut. And it definitely was one that I think may surprise some people, but shortstop Jordan Casares, who we signed to a one-year deal this past offseason, thought he would be a super utility guy for us. Love his defensive excellence, as well as being a guy who does have some speed and is a good bunter. Not much of a bat, but we knew that going in. Would think that he will likely be the first person up, especially if we have any injuries in our infield. At points during spring training, our manager was actually starting him at shortstop because of his excellent defensive skills. And we may have to go that way in the future because Rogelio Terrazas, who we did pick up last year to be our shortstop, still really like his bat, really like his durability. But his range has regressed a bit from where he was, and his overall defensive ratings, at least according to our scout, have regressed also. So we are going to try to make it work with him at shortstop. But if the defense just isn't there, which it may not be, given that we have a very ground ball focused pitching staff at this point, we may have to make a tough move to probably still be starting Terrazas somewhere, likely moving him to second base where he would be competing with last year's second base Gold Glove winner Juan Castillo, as well as super utility guy Danny Ruiz for playing time. So in a way, it's an embarrassment of riches that we've got so many guys just on the roster between Castillo, Ruiz, and Terrazas who can play pretty good second base and decent short for us. But if we decide we need more than decent defense at shortstop, potentially we'll be bringing up Mr. Casares in the coming weeks and months. But we will see how the season goes before making that type of decision. Run through the preseason predictions here. Looks like the Red Sox are projected to be the best team in the American League, although our old buddy Isaiah Hill from our Pittsburgh playthrough still expected to be going strong with the Yankees. Checking in on Isaiah Hill, 35 years old. Will be going into the Hall of Fame most likely as a Pirate with the 7 years that he had as a member of the Pirates before we had to trade him away because he was just making too much money. But he has continued on a path towards Cooperstown. 35 years old this season, has 2,150 hits, over 500 homers, approaching 1,500 ribbies, career WAR approaching 70. Two-time MVP, Rookie of the Year, and a perennial All-Star and Silver Slugger winner. So he is projected to have a big year with the Yankees. But more importantly, let's figure out what our Rockies are expected to do. And our Rockies are expected to be the only 100-win team in baseball, edging out the Miami Marlins by 1 for that proposed honor, at least through this simulation. And with those 100 wins, if things break the way that the game thinks they might, not going to say it's a cakewalk, but a 13-game margin over the Dodgers and being 19 up on the Giants would hopefully let us go into September feeling pretty good about where the team stands. The newcomer Elijah Moore expected to have a monster season for us, at least in that simulation. Actually more good news. The big free agent acquisition for our pitching staff for our starting rotation, Javi Toledo, also expected to have a pretty solid year for us. We'll see what actually happens when we get the season going, but 96-win team last year, that was a wild card. Certainly would think that our goal this year is to, I would say, win more games, but that's not really the goal. Our goal is to win the National League West and have one of the top 2 records in the National League to ensure that we get a first-round bye. So if it takes 100 wins to get there, wonderful. If we can get a first-round bye and win the division with 88 wins, we'll take that also. Most likely we'll need somewhere in the low to mid 90s at a minimum to ensure that we've got at least the second best record in the National League and also win the division. But not going to say that we need to win 100 games, not even going to say that we need to win more than 96 for this regular season to be a success. If we get a first round bye, the regular season is a success as far as I'm concerned. And the Rockies are off to a decent start, 5-4 here in the early going of April. But one thing that I did notice, Jamel Cohen, who I just mentioned, is a star first baseman that we're going to have a decision to make on this offseason. He was banged up for a couple days with a very minor injury, a bruised forearm. Kept him in the lineup, didn't put him on the DL, but his injury proneness has now moved to fragile from normal. So in terms of whether we want to exercise that team option for $18 million next offseason, one more thing that we're going to need to think about. Obviously, a lot's going to depend on how Adam Fields performs for us. Clearly, he is not a regular member of our lineup with just 1 game played in the first 9 games of the year. Not expecting him to get a ton of playing time. Hopefully, our coaching will help him develop. And if we do have some injuries, to Cohen or Moore along the way, certainly think there would be an opportunity for him to get a little more playing time. We are kind of forcing Fields, even though he's a left-handed hitter, into the lineup against left-handed pitching, particularly now with Cohen being a little more fragile than perhaps we had thought. Probably makes even more sense to get Fields that playing time. Cohen is also, like Fields, a left-handed hitter and not particularly effective against left-handed pitching, so figured that was a way to at least get some at-bats for Mr. Fields without hurting the lineup too much. So we'll see what happens. A decent start, 5-4 for the Rockies, 2 games out in the division. And clearly in this coming offseason, we're going to have some decisions to make, not only around Mr. Cohen, but around lots of other members of the team. But apparently Jamel Cohen has heard some of the concerns we may have about his long-term future with the team, because he just went and won the NL Player of the Week, 8 for 16, including 5 home runs, 10 ribbies, and 9 runs scored. Off to a blistering start on the season, too. 378 average with 9 home runs and 18 ribbies, and it's only April 17th. So although the 8-7 start is probably a little disappointing, especially to be 4 games behind the Padres at this point, and also a game behind the Diamondbacks in the division, you can see that Mr. Cohen, as well as the youngster Bobby Perez, are both off to pretty good starts, and Rogelio Terrazas, our shortstop that we were talking about, we worry a little bit about the defense, but he's hitting 365 with a 14-game hitting streak right now, so certainly taking care of his responsibilities on the offensive end thus far. Oh, and it's been a long time in OOTP 23 since we've had a starting a charity potential storyline, but it looks like we're going to get that for the first time here with the Rockies. Is a nice human interest story, as once again Jamel Cohen is working hard to give back with the less fortunate. So we've talked about that storyline in the past in several of our other playthroughs. Definitely gives the team a nice boost in terms of fan interest when you do those things. So probably we'll think about it when and if that storyline evolves. And see that attendance is actually down a little bit this year to a little over 40,000, so down nearly 3,000 people a game. We did up our ticket prices materially compared to the average rate from last year. Sold more season tickets with pretty strong fan interest coming off of a big season. And you can see even with the higher ticket prices, we are on pace to generate more revenue per game this year than last year, which would be positive. But obviously a lot is going to be dependent on how the team performs over the course of the rest of the year. Right now, you're getting towards late April, and it's a 9-12 start, so not ready to panic yet, but we will check in and see kind of how we're doing in terms of both the offensive and the pitching statistics, as well as what our defense is looking like after about another week. Regroup and see where we stand and whether there's any point in perhaps making some different decisions about the composition of the roster. And we do have Mr. Cohen asking us to potentially start a charity. And I think we will do it for the boost in fan interest that we will get from it. It's going to cost us $16 million, so that's going to wipe out the money that we have for free agents this year. Fortunately, I do put money in the budget for the draft, as well as international amateur free agents, so we still should be able to hit those reasonably hard. But it's going to limit what we can do as we get closer to the trade deadline. It's going to limit what we can do significantly, obviously, if we've got no money to spend. But I like our roster. I think we've got depth in AAA that can help us, and there are opportunities potentially to take some contracts off the books if we need to get creative. Particularly if we do decide to move Taratsis to second base and bring back our planned utility infielder. Then we'd have to kind of think about Juan Castillo's role on the team. You can see he's only played in 8 games for us this year, despite having been an All-Star in 2049 with us and a Gold Glove winner in 2050. But he's kind of lost that full-time job to Mr. Ruiz at second base. We're basically just playing Castillo against left-handed pitching at this point. So with him making almost $9 million and then a $18 million team option next year that we almost certainly will not exercise, there's a guy who, if we need to start opening up a little bit of capacity to bring on some contracts, potentially moving on from Mr. Castillo would be something for us to think about, particularly if we decide that the team defense is not good enough and we need to bring Casares up from AAA to shore that up. And we made it through the first month of the season, and it's been a brutal start for the Rockies. 10-16 record, 7.5 back. Jamel Cohen, who's kind of become the star of the show here, named the National League's Batter of the Month, hitting .368 with 13 homers and 23 ribbies. So he is off to a great start for us. Unfortunately, I think when we get into the team statistics, we're going to find that things aren't going all that well. Of course, we're first in runs scored. That is the benefit from playing here in Colorado. But our runs allowed 14th, second to worst in the National League. And with 150 runs scored and 154 runs allowed, obviously a negative run differential, but pretty close to even. So we have had some bad luck. We're 10-16. Pythagorean expectations are for us to be 13-13. So not as bad as we've looked. At home, we've been fine, 7-5 record, but a brutal 3-11 on the road. And the defense has not been good. 15th in defensive efficiency and 12th in zone rating. So that could be the signal that maybe we do need to think about making a change at shortstop, with the fact that Taratsis' abilities are no longer a well above average shortstop. He's kind of got skills with a 60 range, 65 error, and a 55 arm. Kind of like the minimum level that you'd want from someone to play him at shortstop. Take a look at his fielding stats, and his zone rating and defensive efficiency are both below average. Given that we've had such a focus on bringing on board ground ball pitchers, I think moving him to second is a relatively obvious solution. And with Danny Ruiz being our starter at second right now, and Juan Castillo kind of being a backup for us at that position, looking to potentially move on from Juan Castillo is kind of the obvious move to make if we're going to try to open up a roster spot. The other alternative, of course, would be to go down to 12 pitchers. That's something to think about also, that I need to consider, because the positive thing that we do have about our pitching staff is that everyone's got pretty good stamina. Even our closer, Omar Jones, has a 50 in terms of his stamina. Sadly, our expensive new closer only has 2 saves on the year because we haven't won that many games, and we have won a few incomplete blowouts. But I think it's time to... I don't know that I want to trade away Castillo just yet, even though I think it's very unlikely we exercise that player option. I think I had thought about trying to come out of spring training with 12 pitchers and 14 position players. And I think that that's the first thing we're going to pivot to. You may ask why the money for free agency hasn't gone down yet if we have done the creation of the charity. And the reason is that I had forgotten to do it until we simmed forward here to the end of the month. So I went back offline a few minutes ago and did respond to the message and reply with start a charity, but it actually was today rather than several days ago when he first asked us. So that's why that money hasn't been removed from our budget yet, but I'm guessing that when we sim ahead to tomorrow, we're going to see a nice big zero there in terms of our money for free agents, which will limit our flexibility and perhaps encourage us to more seriously think about trading away Castillo in the coming months to free up some money if we want to make some moves. But right now, I think the big decision is what we should do to get this pitching staff down to 12 players. And you can see that with the exception of Juan Vargas, who won 22 games for us last year, the rest of our starting rotation has been an absolute nightmare. Newcomer Javi Toledo in his 6.62 ERA ranks second among our starting pitchers right now. So it's been an ugly start to the season for the arms in Colorado, and really with a performance like that, there's nowhere for us to go but up. I do think we have quality players on the team, and I think tightening up the infield defense behind them is a logical step for us to make to see if we can start getting a bit better performance out of our pitchers. And as we try to open up a roster spot, there's 2 obvious potential moves. Danny Rodas and Will Lucio both have options. They're both right-handed relievers. Rodas has been better than Lucio this year, and right now that's what's going to make our decision. So we are going to send Lucio down to AAA Albuquerque, and we are going to bring up Jordan Casares, and we are going to put Casares in as our starting shortstop. Probably figure out among Terrazas, Castillo, and Ruiz who should be playing second for us, and Ruiz also has the ability to play in the outfield, so want to ensure even if Terrazas takes over as a full-time second baseman, that Ruiz is still in the lineup regularly. Probably going to result in even less playing time for Juan Castillo, however. But I think this is an important step to really hopefully shore up our infield defense and ensure that we don't have another 10 and 16 month. Because with all those ground ball pitchers, and as I said going in, Terrazas has definitely regressed defensively. Casares will definitely tighten up that infield defense at shortstop significantly. And then Terrazas may end up being an upgrade at second base over either Castillo and Ruiz. So from that perspective, you could argue we're improving a couple of positions defensively with this one move. And we are going to make sure that Casares is our starting shortstop against right-handed pitching. We are going to keep Terrazas in that role against left-handers, only because Casares is a bit unique for an infielder, particularly for a shortstop, in that he's a left-handed hitter. So he's pretty brutal. He's not that great offensively to begin with, and he's even worse against left-handed pitchers. So we are going to roll the dice a little bit defensively by keeping Terrazas as our shortstop against left-handed pitching. And he's going to be learning how to play second base at the major league level. He certainly has the defensive ratings that he should get pretty proficient at it in relatively short order. Obviously not a perfect situation to think that you have a team that's going to be contending for the playoffs and a division title, and you're got a player who's learning how to play second base at the major league level. But that's the situation we find ourselves in. Hopefully here in this month of May we'll play better than we have and start making up some ground in the standings. And right now we're 7.5 back. And we are the last place team by 4 games in the NL West. Everyone in the division is closer to first than they are to us at this point. So nowhere to go but up for the Rockies. And hopefully the moves we made will help us start moving in that direction. And we're now midway through May, and things still not going well for the Rockies. Our .400 winning percentage is second worst in all the National League. So for a team that was projected to have the best record in baseball, it's been a very disappointing start. And it's starting to have an impact on attendance. You can see attendance has been steadily trending downwards since the beginning of the season. And our revenue per game is now expected to be even lower than it was a year ago. Have no money for free agents, obviously, after going ahead and starting that charity. We did get a nice bump to fan interest, but clearly prices are a little high at this point given the poor performance that we're putting up on the field. I hope that will change, particularly because our owner wants us to win a championship by next year and also wants us to increase attendance. And right now we are failing miserably on both of those fronts, but we're only a quarter of the way into the season. We've got time to straighten things out. Taking a look at how we've done here in the month of May, 6-8, so we're still under 500, but a small amount of improvement from the pace that we were playing at in April. Hopefully we can finish the month of May with a winning record. And there's nowhere for us to go but up in terms of our pitching. Last in the league in runs allowed, last in the league in starters ERA. So anything except last is going to represent some progress. Not sure if we're going to be able to get out of the basement over the next 2+ weeks before the end of May. Our Pythagorean record, though, is 20-20. We're still, basically even in terms of runs allowed and runs scored on the year. So we've been a bit unlucky so far, but at some point, to quote a famous football coach, you are what your record says you are. And hopefully by sometime in June, our record will be saying we are a contender rather than an also-ran. And the second half of the month of May went much better than the first half. We've gotten the record up to 500. So take a look at the team calendar here for the month of May, and we lost a few games. We actually were swept by the Mets, and then we went on a long winning streak, 11 in a row, before splitting the first 2 games of this series in Chicago against the White Sox. But 11-game winning streak, especially at this stage of the season, will right a lot of wrongs. 18-12 record for the month of May, and we're up to 500 on the year. So if we can play in June more close to the level that we played at in May, we should be right back in the race for the division. We're only 4.5 out at this point. Still number one in runs scored as expected and runs allowed. We have improved one notch to 14th, and our run scored differential has obviously improved significantly, driven by that 11-game winning streak. Our Pythagorean record is 31-25, which if we look at the expanded standings and where everyone should theoretically be based on their performance, that 31-25 would have us half a game up on both the Padres and the Dodgers for the lead in the division. So we've got the second best run differential in the NL right now, behind only the Mets. So even though we're only 500, feeling like the situation has hopefully stabilized a little bit over the last month. Defensive efficiency still pretty bad. Zone rating, though, we're moving in a better direction. Hopefully the changes we made will have some impact on that. Still have a pretty dramatic home and road split, 18-9 at home, 10-19 on the road. So we're 9 games over at home, 9 games under on the road. Hopefully we can continue playing really well in cores and get closer to 500 on the road. And if we can do that, there's no reason that we shouldn't be in contention as we head towards the All-Star break. And we've made it to the midway point in the season, and the Rockies have turned their season around incredibly rapidly. 48-32 record, 600 winning percentage, first place in the NL West. You can see that the month of June has been incredible. We have 2 separate 8-game winning streaks, and they were separated by just 1 loss. So won 16 out of 17 at one point this month. Interestingly, ownership is not impressed as far as our team record, which I said 48-32, leading the West. Still believes he's going to lead us to the playoffs this year, but we really need to turn things around during the second half of the season. Kind of feel like we've already turned things around, Mr. Williams. Also not happy with our attendance situation, although positively with the team playing much better recently. That has started to turn around. We are still down over 2,500 people a game from last year, but we do have 4 years to achieve that goal. So feel like there is time to make up some ground on that goal. Most importantly, we're going to be generating more revenue this year, even despite the higher ticket price. Fan interest does kind of continue to deteriorate, which is a bit surprising given that we're selling out every day, and we are also doing a really good job winning games more recently, but that is what it is. We'll sim another couple days, and then we'll check in on where things stand as of July 1st with these resurgent Rockies. And the Rockies won 2 of our final 3 games in June to head into July with a record of 50-33. Obviously, we're still in first place. Bobby Perez, who came up at the end of last year and gave us the confidence to move on from a couple of our former outfielders this offseason, just named Rookie of the Month for June, having an excellent rookie year. 264 average with 23 home runs and 307 at-bats. So he has been everything that we hoped he would be delivering at the major league level. We'll dig in a little bit to our team statistics now, and you can see we had that incredible month of June, 22-5. I think that's probably one of the best months, if not the best month I've had in OOTP 23 in our playthroughs of Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and now the Rockies. So we are in first place, and we're now actually outperforming our Pythagorean record with the great pace that we've been playing recently. We've gotten the record up to 500 on the road, and we're 29-12 at home, 700 winning percentage. So kind of doing exactly what we hoped the team that we put together would do, with a focus on ground ball pitchers, with good movement, with pretty good defense behind them. First in the league in runs scored, not surprisingly, and we've improved to 11th in runs allowed. Starters ERA down to 13th. Not incredible numbers, obviously, but certainly moving in the right direction. Our defensive efficiency is still last in the league, but our zone rating is now up to 4th. So have made some progress in defense. Check in quickly on the stats of some of our players here at the midway point, but at the midway point, got a higher winning percentage than we did a year ago. And when we take a look at the standings, we're up a game and a half on the Dodgers, who are up 4.5 for a wild card. So feeling confident that we will once again be a playoff team. But as I talked about at the beginning of this episode, the goal is not just to be a playoff team. The goal is to have be a division champion and to have one of the top 2 records in the National League. And right now here at the midway point, that is where we stand, because our .602 winning percentage puts us percentage points ahead of Miami for the best record in the National League. So we're doing exactly what we need to do, and actually we've got the best record in baseball. So given the horrifying start we got off to with this team, to be heading into July and not even at the All-Star break with the best record in baseball, I think it's fair to say that we've turned things around. Looking at some of the NL leaders, Elijah Moore, the new first base / DH / left fielder we brought on board, hitting .288 with 26 home runs, which ranks 2nd in the NL. The rookie Bobby Perez is 2nd in ribbies. Elijah Moore is 3rd. Robbie Carrillo, another new addition, who's hitting .323 with 21 homers and 58 ribbies. Picked him up in that big trade with St. Louis. He's 3rd in the league in OPS. Pitching staff, not as prominent among the leaderboards, but Javi Toledo, the newcomer who we picked up to bolster our record, 10-6 record, which is good, tied for 2nd in the NL in wins. His 6.01 ERA certainly leaves an opportunity for improvement, though. So hopefully we'll see some of that from him, as well as the pitching staff, the rest of the pitching staff, over the second half of the season. In taking a look at that pitching staff, Dave Alvarado 7-6 with a 4.56 ERA. We already talked about Javi Toledo. Jesus Galindo 6-5, 5.16. Juan Vargas 7-3, 3.38. And then Chase Crawford is 6-4 with a 6.51 ERA. I think we're going to swap Crawford out of the rotation for the time being. We're going to give Vinny Gutierrez a chance, who's hit a 2.35 ERA over 30 and 2/3 innings, striking out 12 per 9 innings. Guy that we brought on a year and a half ago at this time with a trade with Baltimore. He's performed really well for us, 3.52 ERA last year and the 2.35 ERA this year that we talked about. Does potentially have the stamina to start. He's got a 3-pitch arsenal, good movement. He's a ground ball pitcher. Certainly will be more challenging for him in a starting role, but I think that we are going to give him the opportunity to see how he can potentially contribute as a starter. It's hard to imagine that he's going to be worse than Chase Crawford has been so far this year. So at least find out a little more about one of the players on our team and see if maybe we can catch a little bit of lightning in a bottle with Mr. Gutierrez over the coming weeks. Looking at the bullpen, Omar Jones, 17 saves. The 3.79 ERA isn't spectacular, but he is pitching half of his games in Colorado. Already talked about Trace Crawford. Tyrone Colbert, 4.23 ERA. Danny Rodas has been really good in middle relief with a 2.64 ERA. Ethan Mingo and Victor Fields both also pretty solid in relief. And Latrell Young's been good also. The issue is just He's only pitched 8 2/3 innings as a lefty specialist. He has pitched in 19 games. I did, at the start of this playthrough, change the setting to permit relievers to face only one batter. I probably will change that back to the 3 in OOTP 24 with whatever playthrough I end up doing in the new game when it's out. Like the idea of the loogies that we had back in the 80s and 90s, but the way that the game seems to use players in that role, I've regularly had pitchers in that lefty specialist role pitching 20, 25, 30 innings a season, which is not really the way that I would want that to be used. So the situation with the pitching staff is not great. I think the talent we have is fine. I think the fact that everyone on the team, except for Jesus Galindo, is either extreme ground ball or ground ball in their ground ball, fly ball tendencies is good. And as you can see, everyone on the team has 65 movement or better to try to hopefully minimize the amount of home runs that they're giving up in home games at Coors Field and obviously in games on the road as well. So pitching staff getting a little better as the year moves on. I think that the addition of Toledo has been good as a 10-game winner who's pitched almost 100 innings for us. Clearly would hope that his ERA gets better. Omar Jones has been fine in the role of a closer, kind of probably a one-year guy with us. And then the other big pitching addition this offseason was Victor Fields, who has put up a 3.88 ERA over 58 innings. So he's arguably been the most valuable of those 3 pitchers that we brought on board, even though he's only 1-0 with 1 save. Another guy who conceivably we could put into the rotation. The reason I'm not doing it now is that would give us 4 lefties in the rotation and leave us with just 1 lefty in the bullpen, which would not be ideal in my opinion. In turning to our batting, very different than the pitching. Obviously the number 1 offense in the National League, and I would have to guess the number 1 offense in all of baseball. Quick way to find that out. Actually, we're the 2nd best offense in baseball. But we're 22nd in all of baseball in ERA. So even though we're near the end, near the back end in the National League still, if we were in the American League, we'd be looking a little better, apparently. But the best offense in the NL, catcher Victor Gonzalez, 15 homers, 46 ribbies, 284 average, and his backup Demetrius Williams hitting .301 with 6 homers and 73 at-bats. Gonzalez was not a gold glove winner for us, a silver slugger for us last year at catcher. He's in the final year of his contract, looking for about $13.5 million, which is off considerably from the $21 million that he's making this year. The only issue is that we've only been paying 30% of his contract since we made that trade to bring him here from Tampa Bay. Still a bit above average defensively, but he's beginning to regress a little bit defensively. Still has the good pop in his bat, but there could be a better option out there for us next year, so I don't know that we're ready to lock him up yet. Demetrius Williams is fragile. He's been a really good backup for the last season and a half for us. I think he's probably looking for $9 million for a guy who is potentially a backup. I guess with the fact that he's a little better defensively at this point, then Gonzalez could certainly argue to maybe make him the starter next year and save a little money. But he's also on the wrong side of 30, going to be 32 in a couple of months, fragile physically. I don't think he's ideal, so probably go into the off-season at least with both of them being free agents, maybe try to lock one of them up before they hit free agency if we could, but don't feel the need to do anything with them now. Adam Fields, the young Rule 5 acquisition, not a ton of playing time, is hitting .284 and 81 at-bats. The hope is just to keep him around, hopefully get a little more development out of him this year, and potentially have him play a bigger role next year. If we do end up moving on from Jamel Cohen, who we've got an $18 million option on next year, certainly won't be a popular move with the fans if we do. And he's having another really nice season for us. 284 average, 19 homers already in only 208 at-bats. 140 OPS plus, 148 WRC plus. And then Elijah Moore, one of our two big additions to the lineup, has been everything we could have hoped for. 288, 26 homers, 92 ribbies, 2.5 WAR so far. Juan Castillo has kind of become a lost guy for us. Was an all-star for us his first year with us in 2049, won a Gold Glove last year. This year he has 107 at-bats and is hitting just 252, primarily as a utility infielder. Very unlikely that we'll pick up that $18 million option for him next year. Part of the reason why is Danny Ruiz has become a somewhat regular second baseman for us, although he's been supplanted a bit by Terrazas recently. Hitting 308, though, in 201 at-bats, better than league average in terms of his OPS plus and his WRC plus. A very versatile and solid defensive player who's also popular with the fans, durable. His contract next year is going to be approaching $8 million, but still may make sense to bring him back. Certainly would be rather paying him around 8 than Juan Castillo 18. Rogelio Terrazas has pivoted from short to second for us. Still not completely proficient at second, and the last time I checked in on him, his defensive stats there were not great, as he's been trying to learn how to play the position at a major league level at the major leagues. Hasn't affected his bat, though, hitting 283 and 322 at-bats, 25 doubles and 6 triples. Taking a look at the fielding stats, though, his zone rating and his defensive efficiency at second base are actually worse than what he was putting up at shortstop. You may remember that his proficiency at second base was in the 40s when we pivoted him over there. Not ideal that he's really learning to play the position at the major league level, but with the way the team has been performing recently, we're kind of... although we potentially borrowed some trouble, it seems like we're largely getting away with it. Third baseman Alex Ortega, the youngster, I guess a little bit of a down year compared to last year, 256 and 15 home runs and 289 at-bats. But his OPS plus is a little below average, his WRC plus a little above average. Certainly not as good as he was a year ago. But he's a solid defensive third baseman with some pop in his bat. Still has a role on our team. And then Jordan Casares came up. You can see he's played 41 games since we made the move a month or so ago to put him in as our starting shortstop against right-handers, hitting 319. And from a fielding perspective, his zone rating and efficiency at shortstop are both well above average, so that's a big change from the below average defensive metrics we were getting at shortstop when Terrazas was playing there. So I think that's been a probably underrated part of the turnaround in the team thus far. Casares, we did sign to that $1.4 million one-year deal. He is arbitration eligible, and his number next year is going to be big. But given that he's so good defensively, if he keeps hitting anywhere near to the level that he's been performing for us, going to be pretty hard to move on from him. Turning to our outfielders, couple of big additions this year. Robbie Correa, we picked up in that big trade with St. Louis. He is very good defensively and also a pretty good bat as a center fielder by trade, but we have had him in left given that we've got the excellent Padilla defensively in center field. Thought that having the range and the error rating of Correa in left in the expanses of Colorado would potentially be very useful. And he hasn't really performed as well as I would have expected. His defensive efficiency above average, but his zone rating is actually below average, which to me is surprising for a player in a big park with that kind of good outfield range. I guess part of it could be that we've got so many ground ball pitchers that we're just not getting all that many line drives hit out into the gaps for him to track down in left field. But the bat has certainly been excellent. 323 average, 21 homers, 58 ribbies, already has 100 hits on the season. His OPS is over 150 OPS plus, 166 WRC plus, and a 3.5 WAR. And that ranks as the best WAR on our team. With the addition of Carrillo, as well as the fact that Moore plays in the outfield on occasion, veteran Yoshitaro Nakahara's playing time has been severely diminished this year. The good news is that he's been healthy, with the fact that he's only played 27 games and only started 11. And he's been very productive, hitting .333 with 6 homers and 54 at-bats. Granted, well, I don't know for sure, but a lot of solo homers in there. I guess the question is whether there are 6 solo homers in there, or at least there's 5 solo homers in there, maybe 6. So probably been hitting a fair amount of pinch hit homers for us, but been very productive offensively. We've got a team option on him next year when he's going to be 38. At some year, it's going to be the point to move on from him. He is still wrecked physically, and he's probably not thrilled with his role. Yeah, you can see he's angry about that, but has been productive in the limited action we've gotten out of him. Tony Padilla, we talked about him a little bit in center field. Looking at his fielding stats, zone rating and defensive efficiency, both really good. Certainly has the profile to be a very good defensive center fielder. His offense has fallen off a bit from last year when he finished 6th in the MVP voting in the National League with an incredible offensive season, but still .279, 14 doubles, 14 homers. League average OPS plus, a little better than average in WRC plus. His WAR is way down from a year ago with the weaker offense, but still a useful player for us. And then Bobby Perez, we talked about him not too long ago, potential Rookie of the Year candidate, viewed as the number 59 prospect in baseball, hitting .264, 23 homers, 64 ribbies in his first full-time major league action after we brought him up towards the end of last season. And the crazy thing is this team is really completely healthy at the major league level. Nobody on the injured list. We've had a couple of guys with minor kind of banged up injuries over the first half of the season, but really I don't even think we've had anyone on the IL. I'm sure I'm jinxing myself horribly for the second half of the season, but I'm just stating the facts as they are, and it's been an incredibly healthy Rockies team that has surged into first place in the National League over the last month and a half. And before finishing the episode, we'll check in on the international amateur free agents. A lot of catchers at the top end among the batting prospects. Check in on the pitchers first, and certainly looks like Sergio Lopez is the standout prospect among the pitchers. 18-year-old from the Dominican. Certainly looks like he could have a 4-pitch arsenal at the major league level, possibly a 5-pitch arsenal. At the very least, a 3-pitch arsenal, even if the changeup and the splitter don't end up developing. Has the stamina to be pretty effective as a starter. Not great at holding runners, not a perfect personality, but still looks like you could have plus stuff, plus movement, and plus control. We also have high scouting accuracy on him, which doesn't always happen for international amateur free agents. So Sergio Lopez, if we decide to go for a pitcher, is absolutely in the running, but interested in seeing how some of these top-end catchers look. Before we get into them, we'll check on first baseman Roger Gonzalez, though. Durable, good work ethic, good personality in general. Doesn't bring a lot to the table defensively. Not a lot of speed, but certainly looks like he has a major league bat without a doubt if he develops completely. Really good eye, so he would draw some walks. I think that he could potentially be another devastating offensive force in terms of the numbers he could put up in Coors Field. So he's certainly an interesting prospect. But now let's check on these three catchers. This could be an opportunity for us to find a catcher of the future. If one of these guys piques our interest and we're able to get him signed, obviously not going to help us next year with the potential departures of Gonzalez and Williams, but certainly something to think about for the future. Don't love the fact that we've only got low scouting accuracy on RJ Gomez. Good work ethic. He's not all that great defensively. Looks like he's going to have a really good bat. Check in on the OSA ratings. They think he's an even better contact hitter than we think. Not even 16 years old yet, so certainly a lot of potential for the young Venezuelan. But with those poor catcher ratings, I would never want to be playing him behind the plate. And he really, if you're not going to play him behind the plate, doesn't have anywhere that he can play on the field. I guess he could be he is 6'2", so he could be a very mediocre defensive first baseman. But he's a bad first baseman defensively or a DH, so not all that intrigued with him as a catcher. And think if I were going to go with a position player, I might just go with Gonzalez over him, given the durability and a little better defensive option at first base. Check in now on Willie Cervantes. Again, he's a catcher by trade, but he's not all that good defensively. And he's not as horrible defensively as the other guy, but still not all that exciting. The bat isn't so great that I'd make a big effort to get him. So far, 2 out of the 3 catchers actually a little disappointing as prospects to me. Last of the 3, Yoel Pita. And he's a little more interesting. He's got the durability. He's barely 16 years old. We think that he'd be a decent defensive catcher when all is said and done. We've got average scouting accuracy on him. Looks like if he completely develops, he could have a average-ish major league bat with kind of the minimum I like to have as catcher ability is a 60. If I have to play someone with the 55 like we're doing with Gonzalez now because he's kind of regressing as he gets older, I'll do it. But certainly don't like to have a catcher who is average or below defensively. So Pita with the durability and decent defense is a option, but we're going to look at some of these other guys, and there's no one who's really blown me away, which is a little disappointing given that I thought there could potentially be some real high-end options in international free agency when I was just looking at the positions and the ratings at the very high level from our scout. I'm a little underwhelmed, largely because of the defensive deficiencies of a lot of these guys. And the second-ish tier prospects were not all that exciting either. Thought long and hard about going for Sergio Lopez, but don't love the poor hold runners rating. Don't love that he doesn't have ground ball tendencies. Don't love that his movement is kind of the weakest, potentially, of his 3 basic pitching ratings. And the high greed and the low leadership, I don't love either. He's also over 18 years old, so he's very old for a international amateur free agent prospect. So if we don't get our first guy and Lopez is still around, I'd make an offer to him. But we are actually going to go with Roger Gonzalez, the first baseman, who, in my view, is the best bat available. Like the high work ethic, doesn't have necessarily a great defensive position. We would play him at first base, really couldn't even play him in left field with that horrible range. So he's a first base /DH, but he's durable and I think he is potentially the best bat out of any of these players. And our scouting accuracy on him is also high in the crapshoot that is sometimes international amateur free agency. All else being equal, I'll tend towards the guys where I have to kind of usually make a decision on the first day without being able to get additional scouting to sign the top players. I'll tend towards the guys where I have better scouting accuracy if at all possible. So we are going to go ahead and make an offer to Roger Gonzalez. I'm sure that some of you frequent viewers will be laughing at the fact that I'm potentially bringing another guy with the last name of Gonzalez into my system, because I tend to do that on a pretty regular basis. But we are going to offer him the full $5 million, submit that offer to him, and hopefully find out in the coming days whether he'll be joining our organization. So although it's been a rather circuitous route to the best record in baseball on July 1st, we'll take it. The team was off to a brutal start with one of the worst records in all of baseball, and since then have been performing at a historic place. I'm actually going to go before the end of the episode and just figure out exactly where we were when we bottomed out and what the record's been since then. But in our next episode, we'll find out what happens with the international amateur free agent we just made an offer to. We'll dig in deep on the draft. We'll find out who our all-stars are. And we'll also figure out if we need to do anything as we head to the trade deadline. Given that we've got no money for free agents after starting that charity, probably not going to be doing too much at the trade deadline. And given the fact that we really haven't had significant injuries, there haven't been any holes for us to fill. Did kind of fill the hole we developed at shortstop organically by bringing Casares back up. So taking a look at the way this season has gone, we lost our first game of the regular season in March. We had a very rough April. And then even in the month of May, things were not going well. We lost 5 out of 6 before we turned the season around with that 11-game winning streak over the second half of the month that really kind of got the team moving in the right direction. And then since then, as we've talked about, we had that 11-game winning streak. And then we've also had 2 8-game winning streaks in the month of June. So it's been a very streaky season for the Rockies, and our record since we bottomed out, I'm going to figure out, because I think it's potentially a historic pace that we've been playing at since then. And I've figured out the numbers, and it is pretty historic. Back in the month of May, when we bottomed out with losing 5 out of 6 on the road to the NL East, Braves and Mets, our record stood at 16-27 at that bottom point before we went on the 11-game winning streak. So since that 16-27 start, the Rockies are 34-6 over the last half of May and all of June. Lost that 1 game to Colorado to stop the 11-game winning streak. And we lost another to the Dodgers, 1-8 in a row. Lost 1 to St. Louis, 1-8 in a row. And then over the last week, we have lost to San Diego twice, as well as Milwaukee. But 34-6 over our last 40 games. Certainly not the greatest in Major League history. If I think about a couple of numbers that stand out that I can recollect on my own, the 84 Tigers famously started the season 35-5 on the way to a World Series title that year. So we're a game behind that. And then I think the Dodgers, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I think it might have been like 2017, I think that they had the best 50-game stretch in all of baseball when they were, I believe, 43-7. So we would have to go we'd have to go 10-0 over our next 10 games to get to 44-6. So I guess there's our goal for the month of July, and if I'm wrong about that number, I'm just trying to remember what I can remember. I certainly don't expect us to win our next 10, but if we go on another long winning streak with this team and win 10 in a row, which would actually be 11 in a row with the win yesterday against the Brewers, then these Rockies will have had the best 50-game stretch, I believe, in the history of Major League Baseball. So it's been a very quick turnaround, and as I said a few moments ago, we've gotten there in a really weird way, but we've got the team right where we wanted to be about midway through the season. So we will find out what happens in the month of July in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.